Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. And Jen is troubleshooting some issues to try to get more people on from a different platform. So you're stuck with me. But if you're willing to let us see your beautiful faces, please feel free to turn on your camera. And if you're feeling shy, that's just fine. But we do always love seeing you. So thanks. Hi. Oh, so fun to see so many of you. And I know many of you have been with us before, and we're so happy to see you, your beautiful faces, and have you with us tonight. So, okay, Jen, can you maybe forward the slide? So this is the part I'm going to ad lib, because I know most of you have been here multiple times and you hear me say the same spiel, but what I wanted to say tonight is I am just super excited about the work we're doing, because as always, we financially support hospice patients of limited means. You know, we do these educational sessions. But this year we've really focused on grief as part of that end of life journey, right? Because even after our loved ones are gone, we're journeying beyond that. With our grief. And so we just were talking the other day about our 2025 series. So I'm gonna let a little bit of the cat out of the bag, that I personally am very into ritual and how ritual can help us heal. And that's kind of part of tonight, right? Music, whether you sing it or you listen to it. And we have done some sessions around ritual, but we're really looking next year at just sort of focusing on all different types of rituals, art, poetry, etc. And so I just wanted to share that. And we're going to have later on, I think it's later on, we'll tell you kind of an in-person artistic thing that you might want to participate in this summer. But that'll come up later. Next slide, please. The crosswalk, for those who don't know, is our online resource that really tried to pull together information from beginning of diagnosis all the way through bereavement to everything in between. So when people are facing serious illness or end of life, folks don't have to go searching all over the internet. They can come to one place, and we've borrowed with permission from many great resources. So if you haven't had a chance to visit that, we would love for you to check it out and give us your feedback, or let us know of any amazing resources that you've run into that we haven't included yet. It's always a work in progress, so we invite seriously, like, as you find new stuff, just send us a note, and we try to update it twice a year. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm gonna turn it over to David Fife, our Director of Community Engagement, because he is so lovingly good at thanking people. So David.
I'll begin by thanking you, Julie. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all again tonight. And we want to begin by thanking so many of our participants, individual donors who gave generously in order to make tonight's session possible. And so we've listed their names here for you, and we just are deeply grateful, not only for the donation that you made, but your ongoing participation in order to make these conversations truly enriching for the whole community. So thank you so much. And we want to take a moment and thank our year-long series sponsors. The Legacy Foundation of Southeast Arizona has generously funded this year-long series. And we also have a number of session sponsors: Right at Home, In-Home Care and Assistance, the Pima Council on Aging, and Harmony Community Healthcare have all sponsored specific sessions throughout this year. And tonight, especially, we're going to highlight Casa de la Luz Hospice. They have been a long-time partner of ours, our very first partner, and have been supporters of our work on so many different levels. We are grateful for their service in the community and for our ongoing collaborations in order to strengthen our community and to bring this type of education to everyone free of charge. So we're going to now turn our attention to tonight's session, Where Words Fail, Music Speaks. This session will be led by four musicians who have spent years playing for hospice patients and their loved ones. The presenters will share insights from their training and work as to how music can benefit the grief patients experience as they near end of life and the grief journey that their loved ones face. We'll begin by introducing Hannah Halverson, who is an experienced harpist and music thanatologist who has played in medical settings for over 10 years. Hannah Michael Heber has undergraduate and graduate degrees in music from Humboldt State University and the University of Arizona. He is a board-certified music therapist and also received certification in neurologic music therapy. Beatrice Krause is a PhD psychologist, fellow of the Health Psychology Division of the American Psychological Association, and emerita professor of public health. She is a certified healthcare musician and has been playing folk harp at Hospice for 8 years. In 2021, she published a book of poetry entitled Strong Medicine. And Celeste Rogers is a harpist and certified music practitioner, a graduate of the Music for Healing and Transition program. Celeste has provided live therapeutic music at the bedside for ill and dying patients, their families, and caregivers in a variety of settings since 2000. We are so very grateful to all of our presenters tonight, and we will turn things over to Michael Heber to start us off.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much, David, and thank you for joining us. So my name is Michael Heber, and I'm a board-certified music therapist working in hospice with Casa de la Luz, and then I also do palliative care with Elder Health. And so tonight we're going to be talking about how music can help both patients and their families as they navigate the grief process. So this presentation, I'm giving the kind of overview of the evening. And so the presentation is going to be broken up into 3 distinct sections with 3 different presenters focusing on different aspects of how music is used in the grief process. So I'm joined by Celeste Rogers, the certified music practitioner, and she's going to be discussing how music affects the mind. Hannah Halverson, a licensed music thanatologist, who will be discussing the effect of music on the body. And B. Krause, a certified healthcare musician, who will be discussing the effects of music on the spirit. So the 4 of us have different experience and expertise, different scopes of practice. But the one thing that brings us together is the therapeutic use of music. So it's just something in all of us. It can motivate and invigorate. It's tied to the most important parts of our life. It can be used to accentuate the greatest emotions we feel, and it can also be used to help us tolerate deep pain, both physical and emotional. The 4 of us use music in much the same way that many people intuitively use music. The big difference is that we use music intentionally and in an evidence-based way to achieve therapeutic results. So we can help our patients and families in the use of music to achieve the best results psychologically, physically, and spiritually. So that being said, the other 3 presenters have their own discipline, and they can get into the details of that. So I'm going to be speaking about the use of music therapy specifically in the grief process. So the uses of music therapy when working in grief are almost endless, and we don't have time to get into all the specifics. You can literally get a degree in it. But I wanted to give you an overview how music therapists use music during the grief process for both patients and the families. And so these are kind of broad categories. So you can use music for emotional expression. So as we all know, grief can be scary and it can be filled with wild and fluctuating emotions. And music can help direct and channel those emotions and serve as a method for expressing feelings that are difficult to articulate in words. Music can help you identify feelings that you were completely unaware of, and simply being aware of emotions can help the healing process. Eliciting memories and reminiscence. So, music is like the Dewey Decimal System for memories. It's a familiar song or melody can bring you right back to a specific moment in time. And I'm sure that we've all experienced this in some way or another. You just hear a song, and all of a sudden you're back at like your prom, or you're back at your wedding, or you're back at a birthday party. And so, music can be the code to that. But it's more than just the memory. It can bring back the emotions you felt during that specific moment in time. So if a patient is grieving their impending death, music can help fill them with positive feelings as a counterbalance. Likewise, grief can feel like a weight on your chest when a loved one passes, but music can help fill you with positive memories and emotions. Relaxation and stress. So if you've ever experienced grief, and I'm sure that we all have in some way or another, you know that stress and anxiety are a big part of grief. Listening to music can calm the mind and facilitate regular breathing, decrease anxiety, and help you sleep. It can give your mind something to focus on as a distraction. And I think a lot of us, once again, do stuff like that intuitively. And sometimes you might even feel guilty about doing it. Like, oh, I'm grieving. I should feel upset. I should not feel comfortable. But getting yourself through the grieving process is just as important as anything else. And music can help you get that and just sort of get to the next day and get to the next day until you're through the process. So you can also use music for creating a legacy. So legacy projects are frequently used in music therapy by both patients and families. For patients, a legacy project gives them a way to organize and make sense of their life. It also gives them an opportunity to tell their own story to family, friends, and future generations. As people enter the end stage of their life, things can become very difficult for not only the patient, but the caregivers. For families, a legacy project can be arranged to prompt the best memories they have of their loved ones. A legacy project can take the form of songwriting to a slideshow with meaningful songs playing in the background. So, providing opportunities for connection and or group support. So music provides unique opportunities for interaction. So for family members who have experienced drastic changes, you might not know how to interact with them. Things you used to do, such as watching movies and discussing them or going out to dinner, are no longer possible. But we can all sit and hold someone's hand while we listen to music together. During the bereavement process, you can participate in group musical activities with other people in bereavement. This can be group singing, group music making with percussion instruments, group songwriting, group lyrical analysis. The greatest function of these group activities is not so much which activity you're doing, it's the fact that you're doing it with other people who are going through what you're going through. You're not alone. So, like I said, these are all just sort of broad categories that music therapists operate within. And so it's our job, or my job as a music therapist and other music therapists, to identify the needs of the families and the patients and to help you work through it. And because not everybody's needs are the same and nobody grieves the exact same way. And so I wanted to share a story of a patient that I had that was in hospice. And from his generation, he was not overly emotive. He just had a hard time putting his emotions into words. And so I thought that a songwriting would be a good activity for him because it's a lot safer to release your emotions or talk about your emotions in the form of a poem, which is essentially what you're doing when you're writing lyrics. And so I was trying to prompt him. Um, and then also when things get really intense, there's a natural breaking point in the song. Like if things are getting, a little heavy, like, oh, let's work on the melody. Let's work on the chorus now. And he didn't have any experience with music. That was one of my jobs, is to make sense of his ideas and help him through that process. But I was trying to prompt him into ways of like processing like his loss of function, the changes in his life, and nothing was quite sticking. So I let him lead, and he eventually settled on he wanted to write a song about how much he loved his wife. And so we worked on that song together. And it was stuff that he'd felt through his entire relationship, but hadn't really put into words. And I could see, and he expressed it to me, just actually seeing these emotions on page as we wrote the lyrics, and then hearing them as I recorded the song for him. It gave him great comfort, and then it also created a legacy. And we gave the CD to his wife when she played during his memorial service, and she gave me a call afterwards, and just she had once again she knew that he had loved her, but just not actually hearing his words. So she got to hear his words through the song, talking about their relationship and how much it meant to him. So that's just one example of how you can use music in the grieving process for both the patients and the families. So I believe at this point, I'm going to be handing the presentation over to Celeste, I believe, David.
Celeste, are you up next? We are going with the flow tonight, folks. So you can tell.
Okay, I don't want to put anybody on the hot seat.
I don't know. Celeste, are you ready to go? Is that who's next?
To go.
All right.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael said, I am a harpist and certified music practitioner. What I do is very different from what he does as a music therapist. I have been trained by the Music for Healing and Transition program to use live therapeutic harp music at the bedside for patients, their families, and caregivers. My role is to provide a compassionate and loving presence to create a healing environment. I play therapeutic music for patients based on their condition and what is happening in the moment, rather than to accomplish a specific goal or outcome. I pay particular attention to the patient's breathing, facial expressions, and body movement, and I watch carefully to see if their condition or response is changing, and if so, I can adjust the music accordingly. I'm going to talk briefly about how music affects the mind, emotions, and memory, and share some stories about my experiences playing for patients. Jennifer, could you pull up that picture of the brain? What neuroscientists have discovered through functional brain imaging is that the brain is musical. When we listen to music, virtually the whole brain is involved. So this picture shows all of the parts of the brain that are affected when you listen to music. Music listening not only involves the auditory areas of the brain, but it also engages large-scale neural networks, including the prefrontal cortex, as well as the motor, sensory, and visual cortexes, the vestibular system, which has to do with our balance, and the enteric or gut-brain nervous system. Music reaches not only the conscious mind, but also the deepest parts of the brain, the limbic system, where memories and emotions are stored, as well as the brainstem, which controls the autonomic nervous system and regulates unconscious bodily processes such as breathing and digestion. No wonder music affects us so profoundly on so many levels. Okay, you can take that picture away now. Thank you. Music can have a powerful effect on our emotions, as Michael said. It can help us process fear, grief, sadness, and resentment, even if these emotions are held on a subconscious level. Changes in the music's tempo, pitch, and volume can elicit various emotions from feelings of yearning, joy, and even ecstasy to sadness, fear, or loss. Think about how differently you feel when you hear a song like Happy by Pharrell Williams, as opposed to Foray's Requiem, or Josh Groban singing You Raise Me Up. Listening to music can create peak emotions, which increase the amount of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is a specific brain chemical that helps control the brain's reward and pleasure centers. Music can stimulate the release of other feel-good neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is a mood elevator. and pain-relieving endorphins, as well as the bonding hormone oxytocin. This is why listening to certain kinds of music can ease pain, decrease anxiety, agitation, fear, and depression, and elevate your mood. Several years ago, I played for a patient who had been very depressed and withdrawn. As I played some soothing Celtic music for him, he sat cross-legged in his chair and closed his eyes. He smiled and his face began to soften. At the end of the session, he seemed very peaceful. Later that afternoon, his wife called the inpatient unit and wanted to know if an angel had played harp music for her husband. The social worker replied, "Yes, her name is Celeste." The patient's wife said that he had called her in tears to tell her that an angel had played for him and that it had touched him deeply. She told the social worker that he had not been moved emotionally like that in a very long time, and she wanted to thank me. Music, as Mike said, can stimulate memories in the elderly and people with dementia. Familiar music can reconnect people with deep, meaningful memories from their past, like it did in the case of an Alzheimer's patient named Henry, whose story is chronicled in the movie Alive Inside. Henry had become depressed and withdrawn as a result of his disease. One of his caretakers interviewed his family to find out the type of music Henry used to enjoy listening to before Alzheimer's affected him. By creating playlists incorporating music specifically for him, the caretaker helped Henry reconnect with the world around him, brightened his mood, and enabled him to communicate with others. This is something that a music therapist might do. It's not what I do as a music practitioner. I might play a familiar song, but I play to the condition of the patient. One of the most amazing experiences I've had that demonstrates the effect of music on memory happened several years ago during the early years of my internship. I was playing at an Alzheimer's or dementia unit up in Phoenix. It was Christmas time and the room was hot and stuffy. I noticed 3 women. They were slumped over on a couch in a stupor. I began to play some Christmas music. Suddenly, one of the women lifted her head and began to sing, "Silent Night." She sang the whole song, remembering all of the words. As I continued to play Christmas carols, the other 2 women raised their heads and began to sing along. For the next 10 or 15 minutes, the 3 women sang as I played and sang with them. They were fully awake and present during that time, and they remembered almost all of the words. It was magical. Then slowly, one by one, their heads drooped and they fell asleep again. In addition to emotions and memory, music can elicit imagery. While I was playing for a patient one day, she looked up at me and asked me if the little girl dancing behind me was my daughter. Since we were alone in the room, I smiled and replied, "I don't have a daughter. I think the little girl is your guardian angel." This thought seemed to be very comforting to her. In my experience playing at hospice, I found that music can provide comfort and solace to families and caregivers, both during the dying process and after a patient's death, by giving them time for rest, reflection, and reminiscence. It can help both the patients and the family members express their grief and find peace. A few months ago, I played for a patient who had just been given a terminal diagnosis that morning. He was very scared and confused about what to do. I saw a Bible on his bed, and I knew that the chaplain had visited him, so I asked him if he would like to hear some soothing hymns. He smiled and said, "Oh, yeah." I played and sang several familiar hymns to provide comfort and distraction. The patient commented intermittently, "Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Keep playing, sister, that's it." He had a look of absolute bliss on his face. I played for this patient again a few days later. He'd been really frustrated and needy that morning, according to the aide. He was sitting up on the bed and gave me a big smile when he saw me come in with the harp. He wanted to hear hymns again. He said he was still dealing with the news of his terminal diagnosis and facing some big changes in his living situation. I played and sang several hymns for him. He nodded and smiled, sometimes commenting, "Yeah, that's it. So beautiful. Sing it." When I played "Be Thou My Vision," he sat transfixed with his hands together in prayer. He was so moved by the music that he asked me to play it again, and then again, and then again. He said, "I can't tell you how much your music has meant to me. It has given me such comfort." I'll finish with a story of one of the most profound encounters I've ever had with family members experiencing grief. One day I was directed to the room of a young man who had suffered a brain hemorrhage. When I entered the room, I saw his mother sitting by the bed praying the rosary. She welcomed the offer of harp music. I began to play some chants and Hispanic hymns in a loosely metered manner to create an atmosphere of peace. The patient's breathing began to relax almost immediately. His mother recognized the hymn Pescador de Hombres, Fisher of Men in English, and said, "That's his song. I used to play it for him on the piano every day." His bed was in the living room near the piano. She explained to me that her son had been disabled due to a near drowning accident when he was a child. She said it was a blessing that I had chosen to play that song, and she sang the words as I played. I visited this patient several times over the course of 2 weeks. Each time the mother was present, praying the rosary, and each time she asked me to play Pescador des Hombres. The music I played helped the patient relax and brought comfort to his mother. The young man died shortly after my last visit with him, and one of the nurses approached me a little while later and asked me if I would be willing to go into the room and play for the patient's father, who had come to say goodbye to his son. I said, of course. When I entered the room, the father was standing tearfully next to his son's body. He said that his wife had told him about me, and he asked me to play his son's special song. As I played Pescador des Hombres, he began to weep in earnest. He didn't want me to stop playing, so I continued to play as he allowed the tears to flow. Afterwards, he gave me a big hug, and he told me that it was the first time since his son's accident that he had been able to feel his feelings and express his grief. He said that my music was a blessing, a gift from God. You will now see a video of me playing Pescador des Hombres, and after that, Hannah Halverson will share some information and stories about how music affects the body.
That was beautiful, Celeste. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, wonderful. Thank you. So my name is Hannah Halverson. I am a music thanatologist. What I often get in response to that is, music thana what? So I'm going to explain a little bit about music thanatology before I get nerdy about how it affects the body. Music thanatology. So the word thanatology comes from the Greek Thanatos. Thanatos is the mythological figure who is the twin brother of Hypnos, sleep, and the son of Nyx, night. Music thanatology itself is a professional field within the broader subspecialty of palliative care. It is a musical clinical modality that unites music and medicine in end-of-life care. What the music thanatologist does is utilizes harp and voice at the bedside to serve the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of people who are terminally ill or dying with the prescriptive delivery of music. The contemporary clinical basis of music thanatology is derived primarily from the dual disciplines of oncology and internal medicine, which are both informed by body systems fundamentals taught in anatomy and physiology. This is part of what differentiates music thanatology from what Celeste does and from what from what Mike does. And from those two studies, oncology and internal medicine, it's branched out into etiology, phenomenology, it's incorporated narrative medicine, qualitative and quantitative research design, and so many more topics in biomedical and nursing literature. So what does this mean? We use something that we refer to as prescriptive music, which is live music that responds to the physiological needs of the patient moment by moment. For example, by observing vital signs such as heart rate, respiration, and temperature, the music thanatologist provides music that is tailored specifically to each patient and situation. Prescriptive music is intentionally delivered and offered solely for the dying patient to aid in their unbinding process, in their dying process. So this is highly specific to end of life and what a person experiences physically, and internally at this point. Part of what we do is we look at the phenomenology of the body. What is happening at the time that a person is actively dying? Death marks the moment in life when your physical body stops working to survive. You breathe your last breath, your heart stops beating, your brain stops, your other vital organs all stop. Your body systems that are powered by these organs all shut down so that they're no longer capable of carrying on this process we know as living. And when this starts to happen, we start to see a person sleep more, have less physical activity. They withdraw. They start to move inward. We'll observe declining or irregular vital signs, agitation. They will have perceptual changes, such as what Celeste described in her patient that had the vision of a girl dancing. People will move into periods of unconsciousness and will observe changes in the breathing. At this point, how does music help? How music helps is we address this cycle that we're all in of formation, balancing, and decay. Each cell in our body, each organ, and each system carries out all three of these functions. And different areas of the body, as well as different systems and organs, correspond to each process. So for example, our head, it's a thinking and sensing part of us. This is a forming part of us. Our respiration, our circulatory systems balance. Our digestive systems aid in the dissolution, dissolving and eliminating waste and metabolizing. So this is just a quick overview of kind of how music thanatology views the body so that we can address it with music. I see a question in the chat. Thank you so much for putting a question in the chat. What special steps do we take for deaf people? That's a great question because we often have patients that are hard of hearing or have hearing loss, especially at end of life. And this is so relevant to the body. And I'm about to go a little bit more into why, but to specifically address your question, me personally, I will move closer to the patient so that I'm as close as possible so that that person can feel the vibrations of the instrument. I've had patients even put their hand on the sound box of the instrument. I've had patients want to strum the strings. I've had hard of hearing patients comment on how my hands move. They become more visual. But I try to include them as much as possible in the process through the vibrations. Jennifer, would you mind moving it to the next slide for me? There is a whole science around how vibrations affect physical matter, and it is called kymatics. This was first discovered in the 1800s through an experiment very similar to kind of what you see on that left image. A physicist put sand on a plate and then drew a violin bow along the edge of the plate and observed that the vibrations on the of the bow on the plate caused the sand to move into a very specific pattern. So similar to this, when we play live prescriptive music at the bedside, that music is affecting our body systems, whether we can hear it with our ears or not, because sound is a physical form and it affects the physical body. And as the vibrations change, the pictures that you see on the right can become more complex. It's really cool, you guys. So using sound, music thanatology addresses the acute and chronic physical conditions that we see, as well as interior conditions, to create a supportive environment. We look at reconciliation and meaning in the face of this suffering. We try to offer a blessed and peaceful death through this musical vibration, this live prescriptive music. And this music offered by the music thanatologist can affect grief at the bedside through releasing, through, for example, the grief of patients as they start to let go and die, and the grief of families as they process emotions, both in the moment and down the road. So you might wonder why we play a harp. The choice of the harp really has nothing to do with the caricature of heaven and angels and harps. Really, the harp, what it comes down to is very practical, needing an instrument that is polyphonic, meaning multi-sounding, that's capable of delivering multiple notes simultaneously, that is portable, and that has a very specific timbre or like sound quality. So when I pluck a note on the harp, that sound has the initiation and then dies away. Could you imagine being in a vulnerable moment and having somebody come in and start playing a violin or start playing a trumpet. It really doesn't have the kind of soft, gentle sound quality that's going to make you feel relaxed. Oh, you guys, I'm so nerdy about this. I forget half of what I want to tell people. So what we do in music thanatology that also ties in with the grief element and the dying is, as the body is in the process of its unbinding, as the body is in its process of dying, we address that specifically through the music, prescriptively in the moment as we observe it. Similar to like what Celeste was talking about. We can observe vitals through visually assessing respiration, or observe maybe a patient's facial features. But really what we see happen at end of life is this letting go. And so as a music thanatologist, I don't often play familiar music because that tends to support somebody wanting to stay. That recognition in the brain goes, I know that song, brings back that memory. What I want to do is support somebody in their unbinding. I do use my voice as well. And often at end of life, I may not play the harp at all. I may just sing a cappella. So I see the question in the chat, the vibrations of singing a cappella also work. Yes, absolutely. Because sound has physical form, whatever I am using, whether it's a harp string in a sound box or my vocal cords and my voice box to create resonance and to create sound, is going to have an impact. And often patients respond really well to the voice. I just want to share a fun little fact before I finish up, if Jennifer wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Did you know that we literally have heartstrings in our bodies? They're called the chordae tendineae, and they are strings in our hearts that connect these two important valves to the papillary muscles in the ventricles. This is what allows these valves to open and close so that blood can either enter or exit the heart. And it literally looks like harp strings fanning out. I just love that. There are so many ways that the body responds to music. And through that we can address our grief and our release and our letting go. Now, I know we'll have time for questions and some breakout sessions, so I'll wait. But I think, how are we doing on time?
I think we're doing just fine. If you wanted to nerd out a little bit more, you could go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Or we can move on and come back around.
No, that's fine. Let me see. I see another question in the chat. That is a great. So the question in the chat is, how does one have somebody like myself or Celeste or B present at the bedside at the time of transition? Is it through a referral from a hospice provider or a family request? I work for Casa de la Luz, and so a request can be made through our hospice. As a music thanatologist, I am open for family requests. Some music thanatologists and music practitioners work independently, and others do work through hospice. So it depends on whether your hospice agency knows about us. Please spread the word, and can make that referral. What was the last thing? Oh, so since Celeste and Michael have shared stories, I will share a couple of stories. The one patient that comes to mind came into our hospice with one family member, and This family member, I was there as this patient arrived, and this family member was quite flustered and upset because they knew that their loved one was close to death. We got the patient settled into the bed, and our social worker took the family member out of the room to discuss their end of life arrangements. And as that happened, I had started to play for this patient. And this patient at first made eye contact with me, but he was so near death. His respirations had slowed, his body had slowed. And as he started to slow down, I slowed down with him to the point where I was just playing a single note. And finally, he passed. And I continued to play, because one thing you may or may not know is that hearing is actually the last sense to go when we die. And even if this person was hard of hearing, I believe that the vibration and the presence were still important to him. And he passed so peacefully. And I just will never forget that moment, that peace. In contrast, I had another patient at another time who had suffered an accident, and I entered this patient's room and observed some things that made me think that he was closer to his death than we originally thought. So I alerted the nurses, and I went back in to play for him. And as I played, he began to go into terminal agitation, and he actually started to convulse and struggle. And it was very difficult to see. But I thought in that moment about lullabies. And I started to just sing to him whatever lullabies I could think of. And observing his vitals, I tailored that music to his respirations and what his body was doing, but also used it to create space for him. And I was honestly a little bit surprised when, in the middle of his agitation, he did calm down and he stopped convulsing. And the nurses came in and they addressed what they addressed. And I continued to sing and play until this patient's family member showed up and asked to be alone in the room. And that patient passed away within 10 minutes. So I felt very honored that I could be there. And I don't mean to leave on such a downer of a story, but I hope that what you get out of it is the beauty, the uniqueness, the presence, and how impactful it is to have somebody there to offer that space. Thank you all.
Well, I guess I'm on now. I'm Bea Krause, and I'm going to talk about music and spirituality. And I want to let you know that you are all going to receive some resources about where you could get training about particular music that is stunning. About some of us are on SoundCloud. So there are several things in the resources. Jen, can we have the slides? Okay, spirituality. And the key thing here is finding meaning at end of life, during bereavement, and as well, with the help of music. Next slide, please. So what are the spiritual challenges that are common to both end of life and bereavement? Finding comfort, finding meaning, coming to grips with mortality, finding strength, remembering, and for both the dying person and the bereaved, reworking your life plans and biography. On the right-hand side there is a tapestry of David playing the harp for Saul. Saul was in existential crisis. He had feelings of persecution, he had severe headaches, and he called on Saul to soothe him. And that's what I'm in the business of doing as a therapeutic musician in healthcare, is soothing. Next slide, please. So what are some of the resources for soothing? Well, religion or spirituality or both, cultural forms and rituals, friends and family, nature, art, beauty, and music. Now, all of these come together in Beethoven's setting of Schiller's poem, The Ode to Joy, because it is about nature, art, beauty, music, friends, and family. And we now have modern research that says that Beethoven, his deafness was because of lead poisoning, and he was also experiencing very many other bodily symptoms. And his last movement of his Ninth Symphony is his call for courage and to return to life. So I just hit this. There we go. I apologize for using excerpts because I know we want the music to go on. So nearly every culture has music for mourning to support or alleviate sadness. One of the most beautiful is the Kaddish from the Jewish faith. And what it is being tested by loss, but affirming faith. Okay, and the next slide, please. And this is one of remembrance. It's a Native American mourning song celebrating and remembering warriors. Next slide, please. And of course, we know that the spirituals of African Americans are so very comforting. And also in the resources we're sending out, one of our board members who is from Africa provided an African chant. But I want to call your attention to the peaceful and beautiful Fauré's Requiem. It is one of the most comforting of all the requiems. I had a conversation with a cellist who said, oh, you listen to Bach B minor's Mass and it's like being hit by a cannonball. So this is the very gentle last movement of Fauré's Requiem. Next slide, please. I wanted to call you, I played that excerpt to the moment of the entry of the bass voices, the lower voices. That is the definition of support. Music is very metaphoric. You have the beautiful soprano, and then all of a sudden you have the fundamental tones coming from the lower voices. It is support. So there is a lot of metaphor in music. I want to talk about a few of my stories. I'll make it quick because I know we want to break out and talk. I played Fauré's Requiem for a reason. I was at an event with others, widows. I'm a widow. And there was one recent widow who did not want to talk. She didn't want to toast her absent husband. She didn't want to, it made it very clear she did not want to talk about it. On a whim, I sent her a CD, Old-Fashioned Me. I sent her a CD of Fauré's Requiem. I got the nicest note back in return of thanks because she had met her husband in choir in college singing Fauré's Requiem. You can't make this stuff up. When Celeste and Hannah and Michael say miracles happen, they really do. I also want to call your attention to sometimes end of life being very difficult spiritually. There was a gentleman, I was told by one staff member not to go into his room. He was so grouchy, but I was told by other staff he really needed me. And I went in, and he was a veteran, and he was talking about terrible things that he had seen while he was at war, and with an implication that he may have done some of these things. In the literature on veterans, there's something that's called moral injury, where you do things that are against your core values. And that presents a very big problem at end of life, or for us who are grieving, who thinks, oh, if I would have, could have, should have done this, or I forgot to do that. And we have a sense of moral injury. I asked this gentleman if I could play America the Beautiful. And he enthusiastically said yes. And I did, and his dialogue changed. It became the band of brothers and sisters who understood him, who went through things with him, that had his back, that continued to be there after the war. I'm now going to mention the most requested song, and I bet you can guess what it is. It's Amazing Grace. And it is about turning around. That's the whole point of that song. I was blind and now I see. And I was in a room that hearing is the last sense to go. I was in a room and with this gentleman, and I knew from his chart that he was religious, and I knew what his religion was, and so I was playing Amazing Grace. What I didn't know was that he had been in a church choir, and what I didn't know was that members of his choir were coming in the door at that moment and began to sing along with the music. These are just magical things that happen with music. I'm going to be very quick on the next one because I've given you a link in the resources to a traditional song by Robert Burns. And he reworked the song to make it him singing to his wife, Jean. It's called The Land of the Leal. And Leal in Scots is that is true, that is faithful, that is good. And he is telling his wife that she has done right by him and that they will meet again in the land of the Leal. What this has to do with the massage therapist is friends knowing that I was a widow in September of 2016. In 2017, gave me a free massage certificate. And this massage therapist had the world's greatest CD collection. She asked how I was feeling, and she played this Land of the Leal for me. My body relaxed, my tear ducts relaxed, and that was the first time I was able to absolutely let go. Now, we're not the only ones, next slide, that have been dealing with death and grief. I want to give you a little gift from my harp and just go with the imagery. It's from the 12th century, and it's one variation from Saint Hildegard de Bingham's O Pastor Animarum, O Shepherd of Our Souls. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, just let this one go into your feeling. It's from my little harp. I want to turn it back to David and Jen. I hope I haven't taken up too much time.
Not at all. Not at all. Jennifer, thank you all so much for what you shared. And we're going to have a little time to process that now. But Jennifer, are we going into the breakout rooms at this time?
Yes, so we're gonna go ahead and send you to the breakouts. There's gonna be 5 participants per room. And I know that there was something that you wanted them to talk about. Do you have that, David?
B, did you want to share the question that you wanted
The
to ask
question
everyone?
is, how have you used music to change your moods and motivation. And then think about how you can use music to help others who are ill, dying, or are in the process of bereavement and grief.
We hope that you all found that breakout time helpful to process a little bit and to be able to share and hear from one another. I was just amazed at the depth of the presenters and all that they offered us in mind, body, and spirit. So I think that we have just a short amount of time left, and we had a few things that we wanted to share with you about upcoming sessions and opportunities as well. I feel like, I always love the time when we can have the large group discussion, and I don't want to cut that off too quickly, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's time as well. We are, as B had said, going to send out a resource list and a follow-up email so that you'll have those pieces to be able to refer back to. And next month, we're going to get together on June 13th again. So this is a week earlier than we normally get together. So please mark that on your calendars, because I know that we're very routine oriented, but we're getting together on June 13th. And this topic is going to be using creative arts expression as a supportive tool for grief. The presenter is going to be Dr. Margaret Carlock out of Prescott College. She is amazing on so many different levels. We really hope that you all can join us. Please go onto our website and register for this event, and then mark it on your calendar for 1 week earlier than normal on June 13th. And then we take a little break from these monthly sessions, but we have some opportunities. Is that the next slide, Jennifer? Yay. All right. So this summer, we have some workshops and a fundraiser to offer you in collaboration with Santa Teresa Tile Works here in Tucson. So if you're in Tasmania, I think that's going to be a little difficult to join us for this workshop. But if you are local in the Tucson area, on Thursday, July 11th from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. And then on another opportunity on Saturday, August 17th from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. We'll have an opportunity to come together and to create mosaics in memory of loved ones in our lives. And it is a wonderful expressive arts way of being able to share in our grief and in our experience and to build community together. So please go on to our website if you are interested in that, and you can register on links there. And then we have one more thing all right. So we will come back together on September 19th, which is the normal routine on the third Thursday of the month. And the topic that month is going to be effective and enduring suicide bereavement support. We have two folks, bereavement counselors in town, who have worked extensively in this area, Shondell Beck and Jennifer Titley Rubio, and they will share their research, their experience, and their work in this area. So please go on and register for that, and then mark it on your calendars as well.
So I'll just go over this quickly. As David mentioned earlier, we are so grateful for those of you who've donated to tonight's session and to any of the sessions that we've had thus far. So we just wanted to share this little ways to donate. We partner with a few different shopping apps, Walmart, Fry's, and ShopRaise, where when you make purchases, a portion of that can come to Roots and Roads. So I'll just leave that up for a few minutes if you'd like to jot those down. The other thing that we are happy about that happened for us last year is that we became a qualified charitable organization for your Arizona state tax credits. So you can now make donations to Roots and Roads, and it will be a dollar for dollar tax credit on your Arizona state taxes. So if you want to get ahead for 2024, you have up until tax day, so next April, to get those donations in. There's more information on our website, rootsandroads.org/donations. And then I think that's it. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to gathering with you next month. And hopefully you'll all register for our Memorial Mosaics event. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you to all the presenters. You did such an amazing job, and it was great to have those breakouts to get to chat with each other as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, guys.